Good afternoon and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm Justine Reichman, your host, and today we have Lisa Johnson and Adam Kaye. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Adam, for joining me. I'm so excited to have you both here.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so Lisa, thanks so much for helping me put this together. It really was, it was really amazing. I called Lisa out of the blue, found her online and was excited to connect with her. She's got an amazing background. For our listeners that don't know her, you're going to be excited to learn about her. She's got a tremendous background in food loss research, and she helped me find Adam Kaye, who she knew, and help put this conversation together. So Adam, Lisa, maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Justine, thanks for inviting me to be on your podcast. I'm pretty excited about it. I started studying food loss and food waste a while back, maybe 2010, while I was doing a master's at Georgia. And I found out so many things that I just couldn't unknow about food waste. I really had more and more questions come up. Since I'm a horticulturist, I wanted to find out more about what happens on the farm. And so that's what I've spent the last several years doing, is literally digging into how food is lost on farms. And along the way, I've become a researcher, a speaker, an author, and a partner in lots of exciting projects.
Wow. That's a lot. A horticulture. Yeah. How'd you get started in horticulture?
Well, I've always been interested in food. From a young age, we had a garden, and my grandparents had dietary related conditions. Mm-hmm. And so I got really interested in food. And when I was in college, I just could not hit on the right major. I tried nutrition and dietetics, and I tried food science, and eventually hit on horticulture, which is like this happy marriage between, you know, hugging trees and growing tomatoes with a funny hat on. So it was perfect for me because it kind of married my love of food and growing things, and I was hooked. Since then, I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in horticultural science.
Wow. Well, I could probably take a few lessons from you. The pandemic inspired me to get into horticulture, but I don't even think I got past kindergarten. So I've killed a couple herbs and plants.
We kill things all the time.
Here.
Yeah, we kill things all the time. Don't worry about it.
Not so good here, but I'm trying. I really was inspired with the pandemic, as I'm sure a lot of people were, to grow their herbs and their fruits and their vegetables and everything, but it's not working so well for me. So we can talk about that offline maybe, and you can give me a couple of tips. In the meantime, maybe you can let me know how you met Adam, and we can then.
Sure. I met Adam at a conference in Harvard that was given by ReFed, an organization that's sort of leading the way in talking about food loss and food waste in the US. And I was involved in a panel that discussed the art and science of measuring food loss and food waste. And it was, you know, intensely dry, and there were all of us nerdy types up at the front of the room, really awesome people, and who I still keep in touch with. And they're all measuring food loss and food waste at different points in the supply chain. But my focus area is on the farm, which remains kind of a mystery for lots of people. And so they thoughtfully included me on this panel. And Adam came up to me after the event and he said, I'm starting this company, you know, I really enjoyed your talk, and I just, you know, wanted to keep in touch with you later on. And so, you know, lots of things have changed since that time, but I reached out to Adam again recently, and we have so many overlapping interests, yet such different backgrounds. And so I just love to hear things from his point of view. So I thought he would be perfect for your podcast.
Okay, so we're excited to hear from your point of view now, Adam. You want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
I hope I don't disappoint you. So, well, firstly, thanks for having me on here, and especially thanks to Lisa for bringing me on the ride here. This is fun, and Lisa and I have had probably more conversations in the last, I don't know, 3 weeks than we have had in the previous, 2 years. And they're always just such great conversations. And I usually end the conversation within like minutes. I'm sending her emails of all the questions that I have or things that I've thought of. So yeah, I just, a little bit about me. I studied history and geology at college, and I became a chef. That's what I did, and I've been cooking for about a better part of about 26 or so years. Food's in my DNA. Fourth generation food entrepreneur that I know of. I grew up in South Africa. My family was always in the food industry in some form or another. As I said, I was just the crazy one to go into the restaurant industry, and made a life out of that. And for many years, for almost 2 decades, worked with Chef Dan Barber at Blue Hill Restaurant and Blue Hill at Stone Barns as part of the team that opened up Blue Hill at Stone Barns in 2004, and really a part of this incredible team of thinkers and cooks and farmers. In this, no pun intended, but this incredibly fertile place in terms of thinking about our food system, developing a cuisine really truly based around agriculture, farm-driven cuisine. Got to work on incredible things really alongside Dan all those years. And for me, a real turning point was in 2014. We launched a pop-up restaurant concept. It was called Wasted. And it was a 2.5-week pop-up out of Blue Hill, New York and Manhattan. And it was this kind of little like culinary challenge for ourselves to create a menu out of product we wouldn't ordinarily see in restaurant kitchens, and not just scraps that we were generating ourselves, but really looking at the whole continuum of the food system and identifying products, ingredients that otherwise are getting wasted. And we created this menu, and it was wildly successful, and people lining up down Washington Place in the West Village to get in. And it was really, it was just unbelievably exciting and fun. Did not come at it from any kind of like larger scale food waste issue perspective. It was really this kind of culinary challenge more than anything. Cut forward a couple of years, 2017, we went to London. We did a 7-week version of the pop-up in London. And I came back from that just knowing that this issue was something I wanted to do to really focus my attention on. And through that time, I'd really developed this awareness of this global epidemic, if you will, of wasted food in our system. The fact that 30 to 40% of food that is grown and produced is not eaten is just it's just sort of hard to wrap my mind around. And so coming back from that, I just knew there was this business opportunity, and started speaking actually to my elder brother, who doesn't come out of the food industry, about a business idea. And the Spare Food Company, our new company, was born in 2018. And it was then that I got to meet Lisa at the Refed conference that she spoke about. And I just got to say one thing that and this is why I love talking to Lisa. She said something. I wrote it down. You said once you started knowing about like on-farm losses, you said you couldn't unknow it. And that's so funny. This is why I know we just kind of like kindred spirits here, because what we talk about and what I talk about a lot, especially from the culinary perspective, is seeing the unseen. And once you see something, you cannot unsee it. And it's like, I liken it to getting a new prescription on my glasses, and suddenly like the whole world becomes a lot clearer, and you see things in a new light that you've never really seen before. And that's sort of my approach to this issue. So knowing the unknown, seeing the unseen, I think we're on the same wavelength here.
So Adam, for our listeners that are not familiar with Spare Food, can you tell us a little bit more about Spare Food?
Yeah, so we are a culinary innovation platform, a product and an ingredient platform. We identify ingredient streams at scale in the food system, and specifically through the lens of culinary innovation, develop new food products. So we're actually very soon going to be launching our first branded Spare Food product, which I can't get too deep into. I'm just going to say that it is a product, just because we're going to have a fairly bigger reveal coming up soon, but it's a product that is made from the byproduct of the Greek yogurt industry, from acid whey, which is a very big issue. But we also have been doing a lot of work initially, sort of coming out of the gates. We were doing a lot of interesting consulting work with large scale food service companies. Same idea, looking at menus, looking at supply chains. How can we capture ingredients, transform them into delicious food products? So also working with, again, large scale food service companies, fast casual restaurants, but really through the past 8 months, the product was always on the horizon for us. The changes in the landscape of food service and restaurant world really gave us the opportunity to double down on product development, and we're pretty close to be launching with an incredible new product.
Wow. So what's the timeline on the launch?
Early next year, hopefully by mid to late January. So we're getting pretty close, and we're doing a lot of behind the scenes work. Very busy time right now to get this product out there. But again, the silver lining in a way of the past 8 months is that it's actually given us the space and time to really focus on the work that we need to do. And as I tell people, that this product is it's the spare food story in a can. It's what it is. It really, it's so emblematic of
Story in a can. I love that.
what we're trying to do. Yeah.
I love that. And are you going to be launching this on the East Coast? Is this going to be?
Yeah, initially it is a very targeted sort of local launch, and really looking at New York City, Hudson Valley, kind of my stomping grounds, for lack of a better word. Part of it, I think, is also is and this is something Lisa and I have spoken a little bit about, is the idea of really, the future of regional food systems. Yeah. And I think what we're doing here is we're creating a model that is actually replicable, that we could actually apply what we're doing with this particular product here in the Pacific Northwest, in Southern California, in Chicago, Midwest, for example. So yes, sort of a targeted regional launch, but eventually expanding from there.
Well, congratulations on that. And while I'm not in the East Coast anymore, I do hope to be able to taste.
I'll get you some samples.
I'm hoping. Here's to hoping. Here's to hoping. Although hope's not really a strategy, but I'm hoping. So, I'd love to just talk a minute about, the data and the analysis that goes into the waste, the analysis and the research that you do in order to get to where you were to come up with that innovation. Because I'm sure that there's a lot of research and data that went into coming up with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is dependent on the work of brilliant people like Lisa, who are actually, have the way and the means to actually quantify, whether it is, produce on farm losses, or whether it's food manufacturing co-product. I think for us, it's really taking a very close look at the food system, and at any point, and this is a food system that is obviously not working, and if there was ever any doubt about that, I think the past 7 or 8 months is certainly has shone a light on that. But being able to really take a close look at different parts of the food system, and being able to sort of tease out or identify where these ingredient streams are, where we come into it, and this is where I'm very interested in the potential of work that we could be doing with Lisa, for example, down the line, is once we've identified what these ingredient streams are, and note, I'm using the word ingredient streams, I'm not using the word waste streams. It's then, the onus is on us, is to figure out, well, how can we keep that food in the system as food, right? And for us, we talk a lot about finding more ways to use more. Everyone's talking about more ways to use less. So actually, we sort of turn that on the head. And actually, we want to find more ways to use more of what we already grow and produce. Right? It's a slightly different, sort of lens at the issue, but it is. We've got plenty of resources to work with. Just look at Lisa's research, and
Lisa, I'd love for you to, just give us your thoughts on this and what you're thinking.
Well, there's so many reasons to love an effort like Adam is putting his energy behind, because what he's doing is identifying surplus and starting from there, instead of, making what you want to make and finding who's growing it or asking someone to grow it for you. So he's utilizing something that's already out there. And so in my work, I've identified lots of crops that are left in the field to a great degree. For example, in something like cucumber, which is hand harvested over a few harvests, but produces so abundantly, it just keeps on producing the instant you aren't looking at it. And so I've identified, like, in some cases, 8 or 10 or 12,000 pounds per acre that just get left behind and tilled into the ground. For example, another example, in North Carolina, where I live, our most important crop is sweet potato, and you can make nearly anything out of sweet potato. And there's great demand for lots of sweet potato processed products. However, there's not enough demand to pull all the 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of sweet potato that are still left on every acre after we make baby food, fries, flour, muffin mix, what have you, out of sweet potatoes. Even pet treats are made from sweet potatoes. So it's finding those items and then adding in the creativity that chefs have inherently to come up with new ways to solve this food waste problem in a delicious way, right? By eating it. And so, the tackling it from that end is what I really love about it. I know, a little bit, because, I've only scratched the surface on some of this research. I just know a little bit about some of the numbers that we have seen out there. But the difficult thing is then being able to utilize all of that. So you sort of, with food processing, you sort of have to be nimble and be able to handle whatever surplus is coming your way, perhaps in like tidal wave style, and be able to turn that into something delicious and maybe shelf stable or value added that can last longer and give you a bigger marketing window. So I really like what his company is doing, and there are more out there that do that in different ways, but his is doing something unique.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, Lisa, about that we have the data. This is actually something that's also it's mirrored actually in kitchens. And there's a lot of great work that's been done around capturing food waste data in kitchens, and there's incredible software that chefs can use. And again, this is on a much smaller scale, not obviously not on an agricultural scale, but really looking at individual kitchens, and although large scale food service kitchens, let's say. What we found, certainly in our work with some of the larger, we've been doing some work with some of the largest food service companies in the world, is that there is a lot of this data, and they're aware of the data. Nobody quite knows then what to do with all that data, and where to find that inspiration, and how to create delicious new food. And it really is sort of requires a real shift in cultures and a way of thinking. But that data is absolutely an incredibly, it is a critical first part of the process. Without the data, we just don't know, we don't know what there is, and we don't know the scale and the scope of the problem.
I'm just curious, given you've done this here in the U.S. and you've explored London, etc. I'm just wondering, have you noticed any trends in research among food waste here and differences between here in the U.S. versus other countries? No.
Yeah, it kind of depends on whether you're talking about losses, for example, in agriculture and distribution, or waste that's more at the restaurant or consumer level. But yeah, there are huge differences in trends. For example, they sort of split down a developed and developing country line. So for example, in developed countries like ours and in Europe and other places, there's a huge spike in food loss in agricultural production. There's a huge amount of food that's just not accepted into the supply chain, or we're not paying enough, the farmer can't get it for whatever reason. And we really don't know how big that spike is, because there's only 2, 3, 4 people that have done research on how big that spike is, me being one of them. Then we know there's another huge spike at the consumer level. The thing is that piece we know more about. Plus, it's really economically and environmentally damaging when that food gets into the landfill. So people pay a lot more attention to that spike than the one at the farm, where you might find, a lot more utility, maybe some more social, nutritional value, but not as much economic or environmental value there. In developing countries, for example, there's a lot more loss and waste in sort of the middle of the supply chain. So for example, smallholder farms would harvest everything, and when they take it to market, the consumers purchase everything without concern for a lot of the aesthetic qualities that we find important. But it's in the middle where there's not as sophisticated refrigeration and transportation and packaging, where food gets lost or wasted.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I was just curious because I feel like, so often, from country to country, from city to city, things are very different. And we learn so much by researching what happens in different countries, their supply chain, their process. So, from your perspective as a researcher, I was just really curious on a personal level, what you knew, what you were finding out as you dig in. Oh, did you want to say something, Adam?
I was just going to say, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but also I think on a policy level, there's a lot of differences, and perhaps this will change, but you see food waste as being a real priority. There are countries that are really kind of leading the charge, certainly in Europe, where this.
Yes, I felt like Europe was much more advanced than us in many ways.
Exactly, and I think and certainly in my experience of these, the 2 pop-ups that I was a part of, that I was talking about, New York in 2015 versus London in 2017, there was just like a chasm of difference. So just in terms of like public awareness, like the discourse around this issue, was very much more in favor of what we were seeing in the UK versus here in the US. So, but it's changing. It's definitely changing here. Absolutely.
Well, and to that point, I'll tell you, in about 6 years ago, what was that, 2014, I spent a couple months in Europe, Paris, Switzerland, and where it was, everyone had a composter in their kitchen in Switzerland. I lived in New York City. We didn't compost. It was not something that we did. I don't know what's going on in New York City right now because I'm not there. It's much more prevalent here in Marin, but it was not what was going on in New York City. In Switzerland, in Paris, everyone was doing it. And it was very common. So, it was partly cultural and what people were talking about. And it was part of the lifestyle. It was already, part of what was going on. And it was not really part of the conversation that I was experiencing where I was in New York City at that time.
Yeah. My mother grew up in Stockholm, and they had composting in their apartment buildings since the 40s.
Apparently we are really far behind. And on that note, we really are going to take a quick short break from our sponsor, Next Gen Chef, and then we'll be right back. Anyway, that's just... I want to thank today's sponsor, Next Gen Chef. Next Gen Chef feeds members with the knowledge and tools that they need to create concepts with purpose and succeed. If you're listening today, they are offering a 1-year subscription for any new founder that wants to participate. at a special discounted rate. For more information, email team@nextgenchef.com. If you're interested in becoming a member or just a part of the community, email NextGenChef at team@nextgenchef.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at NextGenChef, as well as on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Thank you again, NextGenChef, for making this podcast possible. Together, we can change the future of food. Let's talk about the difference between food loss and food waste.
All right, Justine, here's the deal, okay? I really like to make a distinction between the definitions of food loss and food waste, and they are very different depending on who you ask.
Well, wait. Before you get into that, I want to know why it's so important for you to make this distinction.
It's very important because the word waste itself, which is kind of falling out of favor among people with a food waste interest, it implies blame, and it really assigns that you have behaved in a certain way to create this waste, which is problematic, right? So the words that we use really matter in this way. When we assign that word waste, in particular to agricultural producers, as in, why do you waste food? Do you have any food waste? How do you interact with food waste on your farm? All questions I would hope no one ever asks to a grower.
Yeah, all of a sudden I feel really bad and guilty, and a lot of shame.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly the same as if I went to you and said, what's in your trash can right now? Let's talk about it. You know, it's the exact same thing to a grower. They have never intended to waste food in any way. In fact, they grow food so that people can eat it, right? The reason that food gets left behind on farms is because that's the only logical response that growers can make to market or weather conditions. They don't have any choice in the market price or how the food has turned out looking. So it's very difficult for them. So I do refer to food that's left in agriculture and in distribution as loss.
But the stuff in my refrigerator that went bad is food waste.
Yeah. So it bothers me. Right. It bothers me a great deal when I see a newspaper article or a magazine article that talks about food waste and then shows a picture of a tree having dropped its apples. So you're in essence saying to that grower, you have wasted food. You have done something wrong.
Right.
When, that's not at all what has happened.
And that's a really good way to illustrate it, because I think that really does, it's not the grower's fault. It's not. It is my fault that I bought food and wasn't able to use it, or decided to go out to eat, or let it grow too bad. And now my bananas have too many brown, spots on them, and I like them kind of green. So,
well, and truly, as is recommended by the FDA, we're supposed to have 8 or 9 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. And we Americans eat 2, maybe 3. And so, that kind of behavior hurts farmers, causes farms to go out of business, and many retire on, news like that when demand drops. So, in order to support growers, we need to be supporting them and incentivizing them to reduce losses, certainly not blaming them.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing this, because I've never looked at it through this lens. In fact, I've used the word food waste a lot. I don't know that I've used it with agriculture in mind, but I now will thoughtfully not do that. I will feel shame a lot more, though, with regards to my refrigerator, and maybe not make those choices as much. Adam, what about you?
I agree. I think this is such an important discussion. I think the words that we choose to use are incredibly important, and I think that as an issue, I think it kind of needs an overhaul just in terms of the language around it. And quite frankly, that's why we called our company the Spare Food Company, not the Food Waste Company, right? That was a very conscious decision. Even something, and I think it is important to make distinctions. That you can't take this blanket approach, because to Lisa's point, losses on a farm are very different to food coming back from a buffet at a hotel compared to food that's getting thrown out from your refrigerator in your home. We talk about, and it's incredibly powerful when you just sort of stop to think about it. We talk about food waste. We talk about wasted food. All right, just turning those two words, just putting one before the other, completely takes the emphasis away from waste and puts it onto the food.
Mhm.
And that's really important. We need to reframe this discussion. And as long as we are thinking about it as waste, we're not going to value it. All right. And this ultimately comes to just how we assign, Lisa and I were chatting about this recently, how we assign value in our food system. And anything that's trash, we're not going to value, right? I certainly don't. I have a whatever, it's something,
Yeah.
a crumpled up piece of paper. It doesn't have value. It's trash. Well, maybe it does have value. Certainly when it comes to food. So I think the first, one of the most important things we can do around this issue is really think about the words that we use. It's very powerful stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that, because as I was thinking about some of the questions that I had written down here and that I was thinking about that we are going to talk about, and the future of food, and even talking about what does post food waste world look like? Even the choice of those words, I really think should be changed. As to your point, it should be, what is a post, what does the world look like if it was waste free? Or, oh wait, now I can't even figure out what it is.
Well, that's one of the great things about the upcycled food movement, because
Yes, there we
it's so
go.
positive, upside, it has up in the name, right?
Right? Did you join the association that just launched?
I know
Yep.
Adam has been a member for a long time.
Okay, right.
I was actually just presenting
A long
on
time, not that long, because the organization is really like
All
1
right.
year old.
Exactly.
So-
I'm bringing, the people from Regrained, of course. The people from Regrained
Yeah, Dan,
podcast too, because you had asked me
Yeah.
before. Who else? Dan.
Dan is a great friend of mine.
I love him. He's great. We've done a lot of stuff with them.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, because you're right there, and
They're right here. So upcycled, that's the word.
Mm-hmm.
We got to just get rid of food waste.
Yeah, well, food waste is difficult up and down the food supply chain. If you consider that much of food that would be wasted is then donated, there's no dignity in eating food waste. No one getting food from the emergency food system wants to be eating food waste either, nor do they want wasted food. So, we do need to sort of bring the value back to what we have in front of us. It's just food.
So how are we going to promote upcycled spare food?
Make it delicious.
Yeah. Well,
That's the chef cooking here. Make it absolutely delicious and craveable, and that change people's hearts and minds through their palate.
Yeah, I think it's can be absorbed into the concept of sustainability. Like, for example, if you had a restaurant and you wanted to focus on ugly produce, and you wanted to find a way to order in ugly produce and use this every day on your menus, right? What you would find is that you're actually getting surplus produce in the box, right? So all of these little distinctions kind of blend together. Everything in the box is not ugly, as anyone who has ordered a box from some of these home delivery programs.
We have our box right there from whatever it's called.
Yeah, and everything left in the field is not ugly. It's surplus. And when do we have surplus? We have it at the height of the season and toward the end of the season, when people just don't want it anymore. And so when you add in this element of creativity, such as Adam is doing with his work, then suddenly you're sort of nudging people to eat in a more seasonal direction, which ends up shortening supply chains and making our food system a little more regional. And so anytime we can promote the use of ugly or surplus or excess or spare food, We are using something that is already out there. We've already spent resources to create it. We're just moving towards a more circular system rather than the take, make, waste system that we have been using. So it's brilliant any way you look at it. As long as, you know, we can stay away from the word waste, I'm happy with all other words that describe, you know, what we have in abundance in this country.
So just to recap, just so I want to make sure our listeners know, upcycled's a good word. Food loss is a good word. Adam, what was it? We have spare food is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss anything?
Yeah.
Bounty.
Well, yeah.
Put that one in there.
Bounty, exactly. It's how about food?
Yeah.
Food. Okay. I just want to make sure we have, you know, we're letting our listeners know what words, you know, are good and positive to use, as opposed to just telling them what not to use. I like to leave them with what to use.
Well, if you have gardened, and I know that you have, Justine, it's, you know how challenging it can be to grow a zucchini or a tomato or even like a green bean that looks so delightful. You really want to eat it. But then when you grow that, you're so proud of it that you eat it, even if it looks funny. You know, not everybody in the country is fortunate enough to have those experiences as a young person. And so it's, you know, there are other ways to promote using everything we grow, like, you know, putting more gardens at schools, for example, reminds people that food is grown outside. It's subject to natural elements. It's not going to look like the basket of fruit you see on the side of a bus or in a magazine. You know, it has personality. It's going to look different. But the thing that's important to focus on is that it's fresh, it's healthy, and it's good for you, right? So I agree with Adam, just call it food and be done with it.
It's a great idea. And, you know, kids can learn to grow these gardens early on. I mean, even in New York, I don't know, Adam, if you know Steve Ritz. Do you guys know Steve Ritz?
No.
Look up Steve Ritz. I'll send you his link. He's doing this in all the schools, in all the public schools he started. I had him on my podcast last week. He's awesome. And it's called the spirit, was it the green gangster, the garden gangster? I forget. I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. And he's teaching kids how to grow gardens. And
I love that.
It's great.
You know,
well, I've taught students in college who didn't know, you know, I've had to tell them you plant the green side up, you know, who had never grown gardens in college, and that blew me away. But
yeah. I wanted to just ask oh, sorry, Adam, what were you saying?
Say that this is an interesting discussion, because I also think it speaks to the fact that when we talk about this issue, I think people tend to also have a fairly narrow sort of idea of what this is. You know, I think, you know, the ugly fruits and vegetables, expired dairy product, these are kind of, you know, no pun intended, sort of low-hanging fruit, right? That people can kind of latch onto. It's sort of, you can kind of create ad campaigns around these things, which have been done very successfully. I always say though that's only the stuff that we kind of consider food. And you know, you bring up a guy like Dan Kurzrock from Regrained, who's doing unbelievable work. You know, he's working with spent brewer's grain. Well, that's food, but people don't even think of that as being food. I mean, you know, we're at that point, you're so far to left field from, like, you know, a crooked carrot or a slightly bruised apple. You know, I had a long chat to Lisa about this with my brother recently. You know, the fact that broccoli, as we know it, right? Broccoli, the head of broccoli, what's that? Lisa probably knows better than I do, but that's probably about 30% of the biomass of a broccoli plant, the rest of which is actually edible, right? So again, this going back to like how we assign value. People talk about the need to grow more food, and we need to you know, genetically engineer and modify our food for higher yields, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're leaving, you know, mountains of nutrition in the field that we're not even considering food in the first place, right? So it's I think it's also really, it behooves people like us to really expand the definition of what this issue actually is.
Yeah, I would agree. I just wanted to tell you, it's called the Power of the Plant, which was what I was talking to you about, the Steve Ritz, and he's called the Green Bronx Machine. Just to let you know.
Okay, nice.
That's
Yeah,
great.
you gotta
Look
check
him
it
up.
out because I think you'll love him.
Oh, yeah.
But
Cool.
as we're wrapping up, I guess I'm putting you on the spot because you are a chef, but we ask everybody, and our listeners are just lucky enough that Adam, you're a chef. Do you have a favorite pandemic recipe that's maybe upcycled that you could share with our listeners?
You know,
He does.
I
He does.
I do. I
Yes.
do.
Okay.
I mean, I have
Lisa
lots,
says you
but
do.
I let me just take a step. No, no. So I think that the last few months, in a way, I try and look for silver linings over the, of this sort of like crazy year that we're living in. And in a way, this time is really making us think about issues like the issue we're talking about now in a light that perhaps we haven't really thought about before, as we've seen our food supply chain disrupted and people really having a hard time affording food, and just really food access issues that were always there that again have really kind of had kind of come under the microscope. So it really, to me, makes me think of the kind of cooking that I love, and it's kind of the cooking that is really the backbone of culinary traditions around the world, and that's just being thrifty, right? And what better a time to be thinking about that than right now? So for me, something that I just I love and I cook all the time because it's like the ultimate dish that can sort of absorb everything is a frittata. I absolutely love frittatas. Like 3 times a week probably I'll cook a frittata. Number one, like breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's one of those dishes that is equally at home at any meal. And as long as you got some eggs, I defy you to find something in your pantry or your veg basket or something that doesn't end up in, couldn't end up in a frittata. So it works out really well.
Listeners, but Lisa, we need a recipe from you, from your garden. What do you want to what can you share?
I also love kitchen sink dishes. Like Adam mentioned, a frittata. We don't always get that fancy at my house. But really anything that we eat in our house starts with a big pile of chopped vegetables. So if I'm making like an omelet, that starts with whatever veggies we have, as does spaghetti sauce or shepherd's pie or chili, any of these things.
That sounds very fancy, shepherd's pie.
You can throw vegetables into anything, and
shepherd's pie here.
How about that crust? That sounds super fancy.
It amps up the nutrition as well as uses up what you have that's ready to go. And I know people religiously make vegetable soup too, but I haven't gotten that fancy.
Sorry about that. I have some dogs barking in the background anytime we get a delivery. For those listeners that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you guys? Lisa?
Well, you could check out my website. It's at lisakjohnson.com. I have a lot of research and facts on there, as well as ways to get in touch.
Awesome. Adam, how can everyone reach you?
Well, you can go to our website, which is a splash page right now because we've just done a major overhaul and a rebrand. So you can go to sparefood.com. We're collecting names and email addresses if you're interested in what we're doing. So certainly go there and keep an eye on that page because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening there very soon. So sparefood.com.
And then, of course, I'll throw out my shameless plug and hopefully invite you guys to join the Next Gen Chef app, which is a tailored LinkedIn for everyone in food and beverage, whether you're in research or food tech, etc. So if you guys do that, all of our listeners can also connect with you through that. So for those of you that are not joined, you can download the app for free on iTunes or on Android. It's nextgenchef.com, and hopefully our guests here will download and join, and you guys can connect directly with them there as well. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I want to thank our listeners for joining us. And this is such a great conversation. And I want to let everyone know that we are here every week, and that if you like this, you can download our episodes every Tuesday at Essential Ingredients on, well, we've got some people in the background there, just ignore them. Or you can not, got some cute dogs. So you can download the episodes on Spotify, iTunes, etc. And subscribe, share it with your friends. If you have a story you want to share, email us. You can find us at Next Gen Chef as well. And we look forward to seeing you here again. Thank you guys. Thank you to our listeners also for joining us. I want to thank my guests and my listeners for joining me today at Essential Ingredients. If you like this episode and you want to make sure not to miss any others, please subscribe. You can find us on all the large channels, including iTunes. And I hope that you'll make sure to follow us and share it with your friends. For more information about Essential Ingredients, you can check out the website justinereichman.com. You can follow myself on Instagram and Facebook at Justine Reichman. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Next Gen Chef and the platform that powers this podcast, you can find us at nextgenchef.com, on Instagram, Facebook, and all the other social media outlets. I hope to hear from you and see you again soon.